What if instead of sending Luka to the Lakers, greedy Mavericks GM Nico Harrison sent him to the Spurs, pairing him with Victor Wembanyama? Could Luka help Wemby fill the massive shoes of Tim Duncan and other legendary Spurs? We're gonna find out by putting Luka on San Antonio, and because he's allegedly pushing 300, his knee is held together by duct tape and paper mache, meaning he's only got 10 years before it explodes. The first one being the 2025 season. And in this first season, Wemby and Luka wasted no time in taking over the league. The legendary length of Victor Wembanyama paired with the elite skill set of Luka Doncic was pretty much unstoppable, as Luka Magic would be averaging 24 points, 10 rebounds, and 8 assists. And so Luka did average a little less points than he did on the Mavericks, but that was because he was opening up the floor for Victor Wembanyama, who would put up 27 points, 13 rebounds, and 3 blocks per game. And you know what that means. Damn! With the first MVP in the video. And along with his first MVP would also be his first Defensive Player of the Year award. With all of this getting the San Antonio Spurs to a 68-14 record as a 1 seed in the West. And in round 1 of these playoffs, they would be facing the sorry-ass Phoenix Suns. But before we dive into the playoffs, let me explain to you what Wemby and Luka hope to accomplish in their limited 10 seasons together. Because Tim Duncan got San Antonio 5 championships, Victor Wembanyama holds that same goal, meaning that they'll need to win 5 championships in these 10 seasons, otherwise it's a failure. And while this young superstar duo is off to a phenomenal start right now, with Luka's degrading knee, it's only gonna get harder. And when I said his knee was going to explode, that wasn't a joke. His knee is literally going to explode in 10 seasons. So enough of this talk about exploding knees. Let's see what Kevin Durant and the Suns can even try to do to stop Wemby and Luka in round 1.
Luka's got a little rivalry going on with D-Book and the Suns.
I would think this is gonna be a quick one. And getting kicked off in San Antonio, it pretty much seemed that way, as Luka Doncic would put Devin Booker on his ass, and Victor Wembanyama would look like the second coming of Kevin Durant, with the Spurs going up 2-0, and though the Suns would take the third, that would be all. Luka and Wemby would win games 4 and 5, moving on to round 2 against the Thunder, where things would get a little interesting. The SGA and Luka Doncic matchup's gonna be interesting. What's gonna be more interesting is Chet Holmgren and Victor Wembanyama. And off rip, you could tell that Wemby was taking this Chet Holmgren matchup personally, as he would wipe the floor with Chet in game 1. Then in game 2, it would be Luka Doncic taking over, going up 2-0. And in Oklahoma City, this momentum would keep rolling. The Spurs were clearly the better team, and now they would have a 3-0 lead, eventually finishing off Shea and the Thunder in 5 games. And although a dominant series win for the Spurs, let me just tell you, SGA and the Thunder would be back for revenge. As for now, we're moving on from round 2 to the Western Conference Finals, where Anthony Edwards and the Timberwolves were waiting for the Spurs. But all Anthony Edwards was waiting for was to get smoked, as Wemby would make it so that the rim was off limits for him, as well as Luka Doncic cooking the entire Timberwolves team, because let's be real, who's gonna guard him? With this Western Conference Finals series being over quicker than it started, the Spurs would be walking out of here with a sweep. They're going to the NBA Finals. First season, I can't say I'm surprised. And so after a conference finals sweep, they would be moving on to the NBA Finals. And to this point, no team really put up any kind of fight. So before these finals get underway, let me stress the importance of this series. As I mentioned, Luka and Wemby will only be successful if they achieve 5 championships in 10 seasons. And it's only fair that we give an insane young superstar duo like this such a short time span to get 5 rings. And so while Luka is still in tip-top prime form, let's see if he can capitalize on these NBA's finals, as well as getting his revenge on the Boston Celtics. And getting underway in Game 1, bald-ass Derek White would do his best to shut down Luka Doncic, but his efforts would be futile. Luka's generational scoring ability would let the Spurs take the first game. Then in Game 2, Wemby's generational size and overall athleticism would get them the dub. Heading into Boston for Game 3, where the Spurs' momentum wasn't stopping, they would go up 3-0, and it doesn't take an anesthesiologist to figure out that these guys were gonna be sweeping the Boston Celtics. This is the first championship of what I think is probably gonna be many. But Luka's knee is not gonna hold up forever, so they gotta make hay while the sun's shining. And so after dethroning Jason Tatum and the reigning champion Celtics, Luka and Wemby would be one step closer to filling the shoes of Timmy D. But I'll inform you now that there is gonna be some adversity waiting ahead with current superstars, as well as future faces of the league. But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it as we dive into the 2026 season. And in this season, the Luka-Wemby connection only got stronger, with the Don averaging 22 points, 9 rebounds, and 9 assists, almost in triple-double territory. As for the lanky Frenchman, he would be averaging 27 points, 13 rebounds again, and almost 3 blocks. To no surprise, winning another MVP along with another Defensive Player of the Year award. And these two great players, as well as the developing role players on the Spurs, getting this team to an almost record-breaking 71 wins and 11 losses. And in the playoffs, the Spurs would be having a rematch against the Phoenix Suns, and Kevin Durant, knowing what was about to happen, showed up to the game fried, and the Luka-Wemby connection would wrap this thing up in 4. Then heading to round 2 against the Minnesota Timberwolves, you'd think Anthony Edwards might be out for blood, but when you got Luka Doncic putting Rudy Gobert on roller skates, you're gonna go down 3-1, with San Antonio wrapping the series up in 6, meaning that Luka and Victor would be heading back to the Western Conference Finals, facing the Houston Rockets, who had some freak athletes like Amin Thompson and Ace Bailey, as well as monster center Alperen Şengün. But if you've ever watched the History Channel, you know that 9 times out of 10, an alien is gonna beat a monster, with Victor Wembanyama dominating his matchup against Alperen Şengün, and the Rockets coaching staff having no answers for a prime Luka Doncic. San Antonio would be wrapping this series up with a sweep, heading back to the NBA Finals in just the second season, looking at a matchup with the somehow one-seeded Indiana Pacers. You know, this team is, I guess, solid, but Spurs in 5. And preparing for the series against the Pacers, Wemby and Luka knew how important this was. There was way too much young and up-and-coming talent in the league to not take advantage of this opportunity. And so with the duct tape holding Luka's knee together, not getting any stronger, the Spurs would shred the Pacers in Game 1, 2, 3, and in Game 4, Luka Doncic would be throwing up the dagger. Victor out to Luka. Oh! And with Luka's dagger shot, the Spurs would be sweeping the Pacers. And this duo sweeping back-to-back in the finals is a testament to their greatness and the fact that the East blows. And speaking of greatness, with their second championship, these two guys are getting close to Timmy D. And before we see if Luka and Wemby can get the three-peat, we've got to check up on how Luka's doing health-wise. Hey Luka, how you doing today? Let's get started. So, it says right here you have 15 drinks a day?
Yeah, about 15, maybe 40 or 50. What the fuck is that?
And now, moving on to the 2027 season, it would appear that Luka's drinking habit might be catching up with him, as this Spurs duo was still looking legendary. Don't get me wrong, Wemby would be getting his 3rd MVP as well as 3rd Defensive Player of the Year award. But with a slight decrease in scoring this year from Luka, the Spurs would only get to a 3 seed with a 58-24 record. And in round 1 of the playoffs, they would instantly be tested by Nikola Jokic Doncic and the Denver Nuggets. And this Nuggets team also now had Trae Young and Zach Edey, almost as if it was manufactured to beat this Spurs team. But the Spurs, starting off in San Antonio, were off to a hot start, as Luka was hitting shots from Slovenia in addition to Wemby getting to the rim at will. They would be taking a 2-0 lead, all for the Denver Nuggets to win games 3, 4, 5, and 6. This 6th seed came out of nowhere, and after the series, something would come out about what really happened between games 2 and 3.
What's up, man? You almost ready for the game? Luka, no!
But I'll just tell you right now that with 2 championships in the first 3 seasons, this Spurs duo wasn't staying down for long. As in the 2028 season, both of our guys would be back to performing at a prime level, with Wemby's ridiculous stat line getting him his 4th consecutive MVP as well as Defensive Player of the Year award. And I'm starting to think that this thing's a little broken. But what would also be broken was Luka's terrific scoring ability, because although he's technically declining, his scoring production would increase this season. And with the Don and Wemby averaging well over 50 points, the Spurs as a whole would be back in business, getting 62 wins and becoming a 2nd seed in the West. So you might be wondering, 62 wins, how come they're not the 1 seed? Well, that would be because the Oklahoma City Thunder had 63 wins this season. But we'll talk about the 1 seed Thunder in a minute. First, we gotta look at Luka destroying the Utah Jazz in round 1, then Wemby dominating his matchup against Alperen Şengün in round 2, sliding into this Western Conference showdown between the 1 seed Thunder and the 2 seed San Antonio Spurs. And the Thunder were a force to be reckoned with, not just because SGA and Chet Holmgren, but also because 2 years back they were able to acquire AJ Devanza with one of their stockpiled lottery picks. Not gonna lie, the Thunder team is a lot deeper than the San Antonio team. And so tipping off in Oklahoma City, the underdog San Antonio Spurs knew they had to get to work quick, as the beautiful Wemby-Luka connection we know and love would be as sharp as ever. San Antonio would be stunning Oklahoma City in not only game 1, but also game 2, doubling up on home court advantage. But taking it back to San Antonio, you'd be a fool to think the Thunder wouldn't respond, as the combination of SGA's aura, along with the deep skill set of AJ Devanza, Chet Holmgren, and Jalen Williams, was looking like way too much for the Spurs to handle. Taking a game back, now cutting the Spurs lead to 1 game. But man, I'll just tell you, there's nothing deadlier than Victor Wembanyama and Luka Doncic with the chip on their shoulder. They knew that nobody expected them to win this series, and they would come out and take a 3-1 lead, going to Oklahoma City for game 5 and closing this conference finals out with a gentleman's sweep. And this upset had me fired up. This meant that the Spurs would now be back in the NBA Finals with a chance for Victor and Luka to get their 3rd championship on the way to Tim Duncan's 5. And seeing that they'd be playing the 5 seed Bulls, who somehow won the East, gave me a gut feeling that they were probably going to win this series. And that gut feeling was right. They would not only win the series, but they would be getting their 3rd sweep in the finals, meaning that they now had their 3rd championship in 4 seasons. So now the pressure was really on Tim Duncan. And moving into the 2029 season, it didn't really seem like Luka's degrading knee was affecting him at all, as he would be a major piece in getting the Spurs back to a 2 seed, even though they only got 55 wins. And they also got to this 2 seed on the back of Victor Wembanyama's defensive excellence, winning his 5th Defensive Player of the Year trophy. But if you noticed, he didn't win MVP this season, as that award would be going to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander himself, fanning the flames in this little Spurs-Thunder rivalry we have going. And no point in wasting time, the Spurs would catch a dub in round 1 and 2, facing yet again the Oklahoma City Thunder in the Western Conference Finals. Got another Thunder-Spurs Western Conference Finals matchup. Not surprising. Last year, though, the Spurs just did away with them. It wasn't close. It was a gentleman's sweep. And while last year, this Western Conference Finals ended in a gentleman's sweep, one thing was for sure, this series would be way more competitive this season, as the Thunder were sick and tired of being bullied by Victor Wembanyama and Luka Doncic. But in Game 1, once again in Oklahoma City, it seemed like the bullying would keep going, as nobody could get a shot up in the paint due to Victor, and Luka Doncic would do what he does best and shoot a barrage of threes, taking a 1-0 lead and home court advantage in this series. So right now, it looks like there's a clear path through the Thunder for the Spurs and potentially to their 4th championship. But looks can be deceiving, as in Game 2, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, oozing with aura, would take over and show why he's the league MVP, tying the series up at 1 apiece, and now we'd be heading to San Antonio. And it was at this point that the Oklahoma City Thunder started to hit their stride. Chet Holmgren would now be dominating his Wemby matchup, taking a 2-1 lead in Texas, and then passing the torch to AJ Devanza, who would help to elevate the Thunder to a 3-1 lead over San Antonio in Game 4. And while Luka and Wemby would respond in Game 5, it just wouldn't be enough, with the Thunder closing the series out in Game 6, sending the Spurs packing and preventing Victor and Luka from winning their 4th ring. But don't get discouraged just yet, as we move into the 2030 season, with Luka Doncic, despite his knee technically getting worse, would prove that he's still a top player in this league, as he and Victor would be back on the same page this season and would get the Spurs to a 1 seed. And at this point, these guys were pissed off. They would ride this momentum through round 1, 2, as well as barely squeaking out a win in Game 7 against the Thunder in the conference finals, getting back to the NBA Finals, where they would face the Charlotte Hornets and Cooper Flag, who was now a top 3 player in the NBA. And so for Wemby specifically, this series wasn't only about getting a championship closer to Timmy D, but it was also about asserting himself as still the best player in the league. And so as things got underway in San Antonio, in Game 1, Wemby would be making a statement, going up 1-0 on Cooper Flag and the Hornets. Then in Game 2, Flag would respond, taking home court advantage away from San Antonio. And let me not understate Brandon Miller's role in this win, as he and Flag were clearly also one of the best duos in the league. But that would soon be irrelevant, as Luka and Wemby were fired up. Going to North Carolina, they would start to play exactly how they played in Season 1, taking Game 3 as well as 4. Now having a 3-1 lead, it was clear they were going to win this thing. And even though Cooper Flag and Brandon Miller would somehow win Games 5 and 6, forcing a Game 7, they would end up getting smoked in that Game 7, and Wemby and Luka would be getting their 4th championship. And at this point, it was nearly set in stone that Timmy D's 5 chips weren't going to be so special. And so moving to the 2031 season, our superstar duo would keep the ball rolling, getting to yet another 1 seed. But it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. Cooper Flag would be taking both the MVP and Defensive Player of the Year from Victor Wembanyama, taking Wemby's depoy. And so it would be no secret that the Charlotte Hornets were also a 1 seed. And both the duo in San Antonio and the duo in Charlotte, North Carolina would be moving through the playoffs and rematching in the finals. And this finals in particular had stakes on both sides. For Cooper Flag, it was a chance to cement himself as the best player in the league again. As for Wemby and Luka, it was a chance to get to 5 championships and successfully live up to the hype. And with these stakes in mind, we'd be tipping off in San Antonio, and Cooper Flag and the Hornets would take Game 1. Then Luka Magic would respond in Game 2, carrying this momentum to Charlotte and taking Game 3, with Cooper Flag and Brandon Miller cooking in Game 4, heading back to South Texas and San Antonio, where the Spurs would take a 3-2 lead. And with the chance to close it out and get their 5th championship, San Antonio would be losing, as we would go to a Game 7 yet again. And now what seemed like an easy path to 5 championships was obstructed by Cooper Flag. We would be having another Game 7 in San Antonio, except this time, Cooper Flag would be the one ripping the championship from Victor and Luka. And some even started to believe that Cooper was now the best player in the league. But moving into the 2032 season, Victor Wembanyama would now have a personal vendetta against Cooper Flag, which in the end wouldn't matter, as in round 1 of the playoffs, Zion Williamson would successfully outfat Luka Doncic, stunning the 2-seed San Antonio Spurs in 6 games. And this was looking really easy for Luka and Wemby for a second, but now the pressure is really on. They're 1 championship off of their goal, and we're only 2 seasons away from Luka's knee turning into a nuclear meltdown. And believe me, he's still a terrific player, but he's not that reliable anymore. And so going into the 2033 season, Victor Wembanyama would need to be the one to carry the San Antonio Spurs to the promised land, as he would be winning his 6th MVP as well as his 8th Defensive Player of the Year, getting the Spurs back on top as a 1 seed, getting San Antonio through round 1, 2, and 3 of the playoffs, back in the NBA Finals, where we would be having our 3rd finals matchup between the Spurs and Hornets. And this Wemby Flag rivalry was eerily reminiscent of the Curry-LeBron rivalry we know and love. And so with Luka soon being at rock bottom, it was kinda now or never to win that 5th championship. This time, starting the series off in Charlotte, North Carolina. Cooper Flag would be asserting his dominance, taking a 1-0 lead. But Wemby would say, "Who do you think you are?" and tie the series up, taking home court advantage in Game 2. Then going back to San Antonio, the Spurs would be also getting a 2-1 lead. But Cooper Flag and Brandon Miller would say not so fast. We'd be tied at 2 apiece. And going into Game 5, you could say that Luka and Victor were starting to get comfortable in Charlotte, as they would be taking a 3-2 lead, and now having a chance to close it out in the place where this whole thing started. They would go into Game 6 up 3-2, and this game would come down the stretch. The Spurs have a 1-point lead. Keep your pants on. Cooper Flag has Mitchell on him. Oh, who's this guy? Who is he? Who are you? It's a 2-point Hornets lead. Luka is in isolation. He gets a pick from Wemby. This is the 1-2 game that we wanted to see. Never mind. It's going into Dash Daniels. Okay, Dash Daniels ties it up at 122 apiece. Luka's D'ing up. Luka's not D'ing up at all, actually. Now they're down 2 points. Not really surprising. Luka's knee, as I mentioned, duct tape and paper mache. Dash Daniels into Wemby. Victor, go. Let's go. Let's go. We're tied up. Please. Good defense, Luka. Good defense, Luka. Get it, Victor. Push it. Give it to Wemby, man. Give it to Victor. Oh my God. Donovan Clingan just made him miss that. How? How? Play some defense, dude. Cooper Flag on the wing. He misses. He misses. Who made the decision to give it to Dash Daniels? I don't know. Dash Daniels for the lead. What? The Spurs, because of Dash Daniels, are up 2. The Hornets are doing some tomfoolery. Brandon Miller and Cooper Flag in the pick and roll. This is really ugly. Grady Dick, are you high? Brandon Miller at the line. He's looking to tie it up. He makes it a 1-point game. Brandon Miller to tie it up. He hits it. And so now, with just 14 seconds left, it would all come down to this. Either Luka, Wemby, or I guess Dash Daniels would be going for the championship winning shot. Otherwise, we're going to a Game 7. Into Luka. He has the ball in his hands. This is the guy you want. The game on the line. Luka drives, probes. Luka! Oh, he can't guard you. He can't guard you. Pushes it up the floor. Whoever this guy is, what is that, man? Oh my, I thought he was gonna hit that. And as poetically as possible, it would be Luka and his broken knee winning the series, making the statement that Victor's still the best player in the league, as well as successfully filling the massive shoes of Tim Duncan. So Victor was undoubtedly a legend in a Spurs uniform. But what if instead he was in a Chicago Bulls uniform in the 90s? Could he fill the shoes of Michael Jordan and become the greatest of all time? Click on the center of the screen to find out.